Hi, everybody. My name is Stacy Snyder. I'm the Associate Director for Instruction and Engagement here in the library. Thank you so much for coming. This is our 35th Books at Berklee, and I dug through my inbox and I found out that February 19th of 2021, yesterday, was the 5th anniversary where the very first Books at Berklee was recorded by my predecessor, Judy Panolis. So shout out to Judy. If you go to our YouTube channel, I'm doing everything out of order, you can see all 34th and then eventually the 35th interview will be up on our YouTube playlist on the library's YouTube channel. So I'm very excited that this is sort of a new generation for Books at Berklee. I also want to shout out that the next Books at Berklee will be on April 9th with Dr. Rhoda Bernard talking about her latest book that just came out. So pay attention to your news announcements if you would like to attend that one. So today's Books at Berklee is by Dance Division faculty member Aline Newton. And this book is going to be available at the Albert Alphen Library at 8 Fenway if you yourself want to check out the book for anybody listening on YouTube. Let's see. Great. I'm just making sure I'm getting all of my business points up at the top. So what's exciting about this new generation of Books at Berklee is that we are switching from, you can see the previous 34 interviews were all recorded over Zoom. The series started, kind of in the midst of the pandemic. So this idea came out of that. And so now we're really excited to go into this new phase of Books at Berklee where we have more of these in-person events that are more conversational with colleagues talking to one another about their work. So in this case, Aline has invited Debi Adams here, a colleague of hers, to interview and talk about the book. So some information about Debi. Debi is the program director of the Alexander Technique at the Boston Conservatory at Berklee. She completed her Alexander certification in 1992, having explored the technique as a path to healing for hand injury during her graduate studies in piano performance. She did heal, and she performs regularly with her piano duet partner, Michael Serio. Serio, okay. Also an Alexander Technique instructor. They're known as the well-tempered pianists. In her 24 years at the conservatory, Debi has grown a small Alexander program to the current one that includes 9 Alexander teachers in all 3 divisions, dance, music, and theater, as well as the Alexander Technique teacher training course. She's published in the book Galvanizing Performance, the Alexander Technique as a Catalyst for Excellence. And thank you so much, for Debi, for being here to talk with Aline. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to you. Hopefully I remembered everything. And happy to chime in and add stuff. And take it away.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. I'm absolutely thrilled that Aline invited me to do this. She and I chat about all things book related all the time. So this will be fun to just open our chat to a larger audience. For nearly 40 years, Aline has worked with dancers, athletes, engineers, trauma survivors, and anyone seeking greater ease, resilience, and connection to their body. Drawing on decades of experience as a Rolfer, movement educator, and insights from yoga, Tai Chi, Pilates, and manual therapies, Aline blends science, somatic practice, and human curiosity. Her new book, Reimagining the Body, invites readers to better understand the living, moving body, not just as a machine of bones and muscles, but as a sensing, adapting, meaning-making whole. Whether her readers are somatic therapists, movement professionals, athletes, people recovering from injury, or simply longing to feel more at home as a body, she believes the principles of embodiment can help them move with greater freedom, awareness, and grace. Reimagining the Body is her invitation to explore that possibility together. Aline maintains an active practice in Cambridge, Massachusetts, serves as chair of the Rolf Movement faculty and at the Dr. Ida Rolf Institute, and is a highly in-demand speaker on topics in the field of somatics. She holds a BA in philosophy and psychology from Johns Hopkins University, an MA in education from the University of Toronto, and certifications in Rolf structural integration and many other therapeutic modalities. She studied for several decades with Hubert Godard, co-founder of Paris 8 Dance. Her book, Reimagining the Body, recounts Godard's path of inquiry and its impact on her work. As was mentioned earlier, not really, a mutual friend introduced me to Aline years ago, and as he predicted, we were kindred spirits. I eagerly invited Aline to teach experiential anatomy in my Alexander teacher training course in 2016. Ooh. Our friendship has lasted all these years as we continue to exchange ideas and share our thoughts and curiosities with each other. Aline joined the dance faculty at Boston Conservatory in 2024. Welcome, Aline.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, everybody, for all your support. Stacy, for setting up this opportunity. I want to start by just taking a moment for all of us to actually get here and have the experience that we're talking about. So you can stay as you are or find a comfortable place in your chair where you can actually feel the chair supporting you, that you're resting in the chair. You're not holding yourself up unnecessarily. And my favorite question, what can you let go of? What can you let go of, still feel safe? And of course, you don't have to follow my directions or do what I say. You can watch or just be here. But just let yourself, through a few breath cycles, actually begin to get here. And as you do, you'll feel your breath. I'm not asking you to do anything with it, but just to notice that the wave of breathing and the waves of sound that you may pick up on, my voice, the sounds, ambient sounds in the environment, and maybe another breath. And then just maybe if it feels okay to notice the other people, you don't have to look at them, but just noticing the presence of other humans in the space, sharing the space. And maybe another breath. And just, if your feet are touching the floor, where you're feeling that contact. The whole premise of embodiment is that we're in a meeting, in a constant meeting that we may not always want to notice, that may bring up all kinds of feelings, but also possibly strengths and empowerment if we actually stop to notice. So thank you for doing that with me. And where do I go from here?
I'm going to ask you some questions.
Okay. The interview format definitely makes it easier.
So you've been a Rolfer and working in movement for many years. What prompted you to write a book now?
I'll let you in on a little secret. I got to see the questions ahead of time, and I was really struck by that. I was struck by that word "now," because anyone who is even thinking about a book knows that a book is not now. A book is a long, long process, and Debbie knows how long it's been because I've probably been working on it for as long as I've known her. But more seriously, the field of somatics, on the one hand, I don't know in this audience whether you've heard the word somatics, but those of us who know about it, we hear it, it pops up even in the New York Times, somatic experiencing, somatic this and that, embodiment this and that. So there's a word that's around, and it's got something to do with the body, but we don't quite know what. And I feel very strongly that we want to be more articulate about what we think we're doing as practitioners, and also just for the general public, not just for dancers, but also for dancers. For pretty much everybody is a body, and I feel like we don't have the language that lets everybody be as enthusiastic and excited as people like Debi and I are. So I wanted to share my experience, my 40-plus year journey into this field, in particular because I didn't come into the field as a dancer. I wasn't an athlete. I studied philosophy and psychology, and I was drawn to the idea that I am a little system in a bigger system called Earth, the gravitational field, that I learned from Dr. Ida Rolf's work. And so following that work and that idea, I became a Rolfer, which is a way of helping people with their posture and their chronic pain, and started my practice. I could go on.
I know.
So, but do you want to?
Yeah, I think I want to intercept here. I see this book as filling a gap in what has previously been out there in the somatic world. The notion that our way of living in this world is determined by the world itself is, for me, the gap that you're filling. Thank you for that. And what do you think the book provides?
Yeah, again, I think one thing about me is that I am a bit of a stickler for words. And so this idea determined by, that sounds very fixed. But on the one hand, it's true in that our bodies are the inheritance of millions of years of evolution. Just this morning, I was reading about how Homo sapiens arose during a time of extreme climate change millions of years ago, basically the same body that we're sitting with right now. So that shape, in a sense, you could say we're determined. On the other hand, these amazing systems that we are constantly able to change. And in a moment, we can dramatically change our experience. So again, articulating this story seems to me really important. A lot of somatic practitioners want to move and not necessarily describe what they're doing in words. So I feel like articulating this landscape of embodiment is really important for us to be able to understand and work better with ourselves and, in basically everything that we do. Yeah. So,
can you tell us about Hubert?
Sure. So I'm a Rolfer, and in 1990, I went to the annual conference of Rolfers, and there was a speaker. And in fact, this picture is what he showed then in 1990. He is one of the co-founders of I Say Paris 8 Dance. It's a university department in Paris. And when we met him, he was a Rolfer, and he was also doing research with breast cancer patients in Italy and working with an orchestra in Liège, and had been a ballet dancer himself, and just was really an unusual person coming to talk to us about gravity. And one of the most unusual things about Hubert is that he didn't want to found a school or be a brand. And he just shared very openly a lot of beautiful perspective that I learned a lot from, and I wanted to share it with you in this book.
What is it that you see in his teachings that's so different and so valuable?
So in order to tell you about that, actually, I'm going to read from this book. And I'm going to say, so I met Hubert at this conference, and during the talk in 1990, Hubert showed this slide, a slide of Van Gogh's paintings, First Steps. As you can see, the painting shows a farmer in a field, his shovel on the ground beside him, and across the yard from the farmer, just beyond the garden's gate, a mother and toddler. The farmer crouches, offering his waiting arms to the child a few yards away. The little child stands with their mother's support and reaches towards the farmer. How much there is in that moment. All the possibilities that emerge from getting up on 2 feet. The familiar presence of a mother who provides support, while the farmer's outstretched arms invite the child towards a great adventure, crossing the field. What will happen next? This is the story of standing up, the story of a living being who is always in relationship with physical surroundings, with human caregivers, and with gravity. In a sense, our relationship with gravity is the primary relationship. Though an invisible presence, it is the most consistent force we experience. So you're sitting in your chair. Why are you not floating? Gravity. You may not realize that you're feeling this, but it's shaping your every moment, your every breath. I'm going to go on. Hubert explained that in order to move, we need first to be oriented in gravity, to know which way is up. Finding our way in gravity is an activity we are all engaging in as we stay upright and move, whether we realize it or not. Van Gogh's painting captures the moment when we take on our own independent management of gravity. Leaving the dependable support of the caregiver, we take a risk. We can lose our balance and fall over, yet there are also benefits. We can explore the world on our own and develop agency. Hubert described this interaction with gravity as the foundation of our earliest relationships and our own capacity for expression, even before we stand or walk independently. As I listened to Hubert, body and gravity became more than a mechanical structure. Through his eyes, I could see us as body in motion, a meaning-filled expression in which our physical experience, our relational experience, and our sense of self are all part of one system. He called this integrated perspective tonic function. From our very first meeting, Hubert offered an alternative to the body-mind split, a different framework in which a person is fundamentally in relationship with other people and our surroundings. But in addition, he offered a basis in neuroscience and research to ground the intuitions and give language to the experiences of practitioners in the field of somatics. So I hope that kind of answers the question. For me, Hubert, never once did he say, oh, just experience it. Don't ask me why. And so I was always invited deeper into what is this that we're doing? Because most of what's important is elusive and very not noticed. It doesn't mean it's not important, as we'll see, but it's something you have to pay attention to in a different way in order to catch on to.
Well, makes you want to read the book, right? So, as I'm reading the book and I've read about all the different experiences you had with Hubert and this wealth of knowledge, how did you choose what to write about?
Yeah, that's a good question. Basically, every single year that I studied with Hubert, which is probably over 3 decades, I begged him to write a book. I wanted to write as soon as I started to hear him talking. I was like, this is so clear and helpful, and I want to share it with people. And Hubert was not interested in writing a book. So year after year, we gathered all this information. And over time, I realized that if a book was going to be written, it was going to have to be me who did it. And so I started writing about my practice. At the end of every day of work, I would write either how it was for me to work with the person I was working with, or how I felt, or just things about my experiences. And over many years of doing that, a certain number of themes started to emerge. You're always somewhere. You may think that you're, a bunch of ideas or feelings in your head, but no, actually your body is located in a space. And when we come into that space, options emerge. So certain themes started to be important. And I also realized that you can't just write about ideas. You have to tell stories. And so I started telling my story, my client's story, my experiences in workshops that led me to think about this stuff differently from how even I dare say you might be thinking about yourself. So often we're thinking about the body kind of as a machine, or as my dance students say, we don't think about our bodies unless they hurt, or what I look like as my body, not what I'm actually experiencing. So there's so much to write about. And eventually I found a system that didn't ask me to write an outline, and instead I could just write islands. And to my surprise, after a while, organization began to emerge. The idea originally, I thought, okay, I'll have an emotional body chapter and a mechanical body chapter. But in the end, it turned into verbs. So each section of the book is, the first one is moving, and the next one is expressing and perceiving, trying to get at that idea of we are a transformative process. The things that anchor us, for better or for worse, we might be able to hold a little bit more gently and get something from that.
So I have to ask a question that's not on the script.
That's okay.
Here. Did Hubert know you were writing this, that you were planning to write about his work and what you had learned from him?
Absolutely. I mean, I honestly, he's so generous. I was able to use tons of transcripts that I made, pieces of transcripts, and I've shared the drafts with him over the years. The first thing that happened actually is that when the pandemic came, I was able to write a whole draft out of my islands. And then we haven't talked about Rebecca yet, so this is a good moment. My colleague a group of us had been studying with Hubert for a long time, and so I had asked for help before, but when I had a draft, we decided we would teach the draft as a 3-semester class, so that we could just take our time going through the material. And I asked my colleague, Rebecca Carly Mills, to teach that with me. And then from that draft, I did the book proposal. 2 more years went by, and the editing process was hard. And a project like this, it's a little bit like building an edifice. So in the end, Rebecca came in and helped me get over the finish line with her conversation and dialogue. And it's another thing that really came home to me is that this material is meant to be talked about, not, off in some abstract realm, and that you really need friends, spiritual friends and somatic friends, to share language and try to come up with how do we talk about this experience. So
So your new book is titled Reimagining the Body, Somatic Practice, Embodiment, and the Science of Movement. Tell me a little bit about why we might want to reimagine our bodies.
Okay, I'm also going to read this piece because I worked so hard to craft this language. I want to take advantage of it. It's important to me that we're talking about imagination here. So I'll read in the orientation how to read this book. Gaston Bachelard writes, "The basic word in the lexicon of the imagination is not image, but imaginary. Instead of forming images, imagination offers the potential to change our perceptions, to allow us to experience something new. In that spirit, reimagining the body offers an opportunity to free the body from the current tyranny of images, the body as a machine, the body as an object, the body split off from the mind, the body separated from our surroundings." And I would add, the body in the mirror. Instead of those limiting images, this book proposes constructive alternatives that lead to a richer experience of embodiment. By welcoming images from a surprising array of sources, from mobile robots to infants, from current neuroscientists to ancient Greeks, this book aims to provide readers with tools and confidence to aid in their own lifelong exploration of embodied intelligence. So it was important to say reimagining is not getting it right, getting the right new body and giving up the old way. It's really trying to get at the idea that, what do you think right now? What is the real body? What is the real body? Is it the video you have playing of yourself that you saw in your stream? Is it the sensation of the chair? Is it what your doctor says is you? What is the real body? Do we have to just land on one real way without a context? In a medical context, I'm glad that surgery is there. In this moment, to be more present with you, is it useful for me to think of my body as a cadaver, as an anatomical, fiction? I don't think so. So the idea is really that something that we don't recognize is that we are stuck in some very limiting ideas. Somebody asked me, how come sacrum isn't in the index? So the sacrum, for those of you who might not know, is what we call the imaginary isolated bone at the base of our spine before our tailbone. But you can't have a sacrum without everything else around it unless you're dissected or you're a piece of plastic skeleton. There's no thing that's completely real in isolation. So I know it's a stretch, but I also had a question from someone, because I do say in the book, can you exercise one muscle at a time? No, you can't. You can't. You can if you're unconscious and there's some kind of stimulation on those muscle fibers, but the very idea that you have a muscle is a construct. It's not you. You have cells. You are tissue. You are a community. So what happens when we let ourselves imagine ourselves differently is possibilities, and all kinds of wonderful dimensions emerge for us. So I do get excited about it, even after 40 years. What the hell? So
this is why you can see I wanted Aline to teach experiential anatomy on the Alexander training course. Yes, yes. But how did you come to write about robots?
Yeah, so mobile robots. So can we get that little 20-second? This is can I just hold it 1 second? I do write about the DARPA one. That's 2020, that one. I write about this in one of the chapters that many years ago now, 2015, after the tsunami in Japan where there was a nuclear meltdown, there was a lot of money given to roboticists to try to create a mobile robot that might have been able to go into that environment and do the things that were necessary to save people from the nuclear disaster. So they had they had a big contest with a lot of money, and they had certain tasks that the robots were supposed to do. And after that, this is what you got to see on YouTube. A lot of the robots fell down. This was a lot of money. And this was 2015. I like to be intellectually honest. So I was looking up like, okay, how much better have they gotten? And this past 3 months, mobile robot in Russia falls over on the stage. Mobile robot in China falls over on the stage. The fashion robot could be okay as long as there were no stairs. So it's funny, but when you watch those falls, you could recognize that no human would fall that way. They wouldn't just, they would be feeling balance is off, balance is off. And so I just started using them in talks because it's hard for me, to say to ourselves, at this moment, I'm involved in a very complex activity that is called not falling down. And I'm doing that, and it's shaping every little bit of my experience, because if I organize not falling down this way, it's a different world out there than if I organize not falling down this way. And I wanted to say this when I was reading about what does it mean to say gravity is the primary relationship, And I'll just show you, because here I am, I'm in gravity, and I'm going to change my position. And I'm going to say hello to Debi. And so I could stay in my chair and not say hello to Debi. I could leap up and say hello to Debi, somewhat almost falling over. Or I can find my way in gravity in a way that I can be in relationship with Debi, or sit back down in my chair, or move and talk to all of you. Now I have my own gravity. This much, and you can probably all feel that I'm going to fall on you, and your bodies start to go a little too close. Or if I'm here, keeping my distance, you feel that too. So my primary relationship, in the sense that it allows me to be in relationship or keep my boundaries. So instead of you being my primary relationship, where now if Debi moves, I'm in trouble, I have my own gravity. So it's not something that we recognize is as powerful as it is. And sometimes people practice mindfulness, but they don't realize that, in a sense, it's not really mindfulness. It's picking up on this conversation that basically is what is holding me on the surface of the planet, that I can use more effectively or less effectively. So Yeah.
Yeah, do you want me to do the other one? Or
Well,
What's the other
are we
one?
ready to have an activity?
Yeah.
Okay, hold it
I
for
wanted
just
to
a minute.
mention that my favorite parts of this book, well, it's hard to say what my favorite part, because every page was beautiful.
Aw.
It's a rarity for me to read a book and agree with what's being said. So thank you for that. It's very true.
That's funny.
But some of my favorite parts of this, that's true. Some of my favorite parts of this book are the embodiment practices. So I was thinking you could take us through an activity.
Yeah, I will. What I want to say is that in order to make this book make sense to the most number of people, I included in almost every section, there's a story of a client or a story of me in a workshop, and there's also something you can try this at home carefully, so that you would be able to, reading the book, have some of the experience, because the material is an experience. But along with any embodiment practice, there's also a lot of context and explanation and why are we doing this, because I think that's just as important. Many people go to yoga classes and maybe it feels good, or maybe you overstretch sometimes, but why are you doing it? What is it that you're telling yourself about, what is this good for? And the same with many other kinds of practices that we do. Sometimes I feel like we in the somatic world need to get better at helping people understand what's important about all of this stuff. So that said, we're going to play around a little bit with the simplicity of sitting and standing. So can you show that last robot? This is just the task of getting out of the buggy. Okay.
This feels so accomplished.
Is that a recent one, or?
That's from the same DARPA. DARPA is Defense Something Research Agency. Okay, so you think so. Just put your laptops down if you can, and just stand up and sit down a few times. You don't have to do anything fancy. You are so much better at doing this. Not a one of you is at risk of falling, and I'm not making fun of people who are at risk of falling, but I'm just saying that for most of us, many of us in this room, this isn't a complicated task. And sit down again. And then the next time, try to count the number of weight shifts. What you saw in that robot was too many weight shifts to be able to handle it. But you seem to be doing okay. So just try, notice as you come to standing, what is actually has to happen. There's no right number. And some people don't want to get out of their chair. That's okay too. So just, this is an illustration of how something that you take for granted, most of us, is not easy to program a robot to do. And we don't appreciate just how amazing that is, but also how, in a way, how many choices we're making, and how that means we have other choices that we could be making. And that these different things, at the end of the day, when you say my shoulders hurt, or I'm so tired, that's a result of many, many, many choices throughout your day that you could have just done a little differently, and that would have made a big difference at the end of your day, because you repeat these gestures thousands of times a day. So just to play around with how we're doing sitting and standing for a moment, let's just choose the next time that you do it to, before you move, because that's the other thing that a big theme in movement is that most of what's important has happened before you see any action. So right now, I'm amplifying the contact of my feet and the floor through my shoes and my socks and the rug. And I'm feeling a meeting of the floor and my feet, and that I'm going to use that as my starting point for my next standing. And you can do it too. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to amplify the ground sensation. And you notice that I'm not saying feel inside your body. No, I'm saying feel the floor. Feel where you are. Feel what's supporting you. And you don't have to stand up in a certain way or at a certain pace, but just turn up the dial of the floor and notice what effect. You might like it, you might not like it, but you're using your attention to change the dial on this amazing activity that normally your, what I'm going to call your system or the animal, is taking care of for you. So then, having explored that, the next time I'm going to tune up my sense of smell, which the crackers are wafting into my nose. But you could also use sounds, but I'm going to amplify the senses that connect me with the world. Not your eyes, if you can avoid that, but just do a stand up, sit down. You can bring your chair closer to the crackers. A stand up, sit down, where you're listening and you're smelling and you're noticing with your ears and the temperature in the room with your skin. And, you know, some of you are very familiar with these kinds of processes, and some of you maybe never ever did one before. And again, you don't have to do anything that I say. So then, yeah, the next time, just go ahead and pick up an object as you stand up. Find something to pick up. If you can pick up the person next to you, feel free. And then again, go ahead and let yourself put the object down. And I'll leave it up to you whether you choose to amplify the ground or amplify the sense of space in your next meeting with the object. What's it like to pick up something, to add a relationship with an object to your ground or to your sense of the space around you? And notice, can you tell a difference when you pick up an object and you let yourself feel your ground support, or when you pick up an object and you let yourself feel the sense of the room around you? And whether that makes a difference in your experience. You may or may not notice. And then, just for the last one, imagine, as someone in the newspaper started talking about panpsychism, which is the idea that everything is alive. So in this context, we'll wait for the book to call. I'm waiting for the book to call my hand, and I'm going to pick it up. And then I'm waiting for the earth and the table to call the book back, and I'm going to put it back. So just play with that. You can stand or sit as you like, but give yourself a moment to change what you're imagining the world, the way that you're imagining the world. And wait for the earth to call the object back. So now that was just a quick experiment in how you can change your perceptions, and I'm interested to hear what you experienced from doing that. And also we're moving towards question and answer in terms of our timing. So if you have questions for me about the book or anything else, I'm happy to answer them. And I'd also love to hear just what was that like for you doing that experiment?
I'd be happy to start.
Sure.
I have terrible balance. I've had 2 hip replacements. I had congenital hip dysplasia, and imagining the ground helps my balance. I could immediately tell the difference. Yeah, I was doing less weight adjustment. I felt literally more grounded. So I have to remember that. I need to remember that because I need that.
That's really the hardest part.
Mhm.
Is that we we forget, which is interesting.
Yes.
And partly why I love to show the robots, because if we were, if we felt like we were $1 million machines, would we remember? If we recognize just how amazing it is that that's true, that we can change things so quickly, would we remember? I don't,
Yeah, well, and my other follow-up, and then I'm happy to pass this for the recording. It would be helpful if people ask their questions in the mic. But I had an acupuncturist years ago, and I had a pinched nerve recommend Tai Chi to me. I never pursued it, but when I've heard about like Alexander technique and some of what you're talking about, I don't know much about Tai Chi, but my sense is there's some similarities in like mind-body connection. I'm just curious if that's in any way part of your research, if you can speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. What's nice now is that there's a field of somatics, which kind of is mind-body, body-mind together. What I think it's interesting I read a quote from Carl Jung, who was saying that maybe Westerners shouldn't do yoga because it's not of our culture. And so for me, I think that sometimes when we go to we leave our culture to understand something, but what is very nice is when we can bring them together. And so I feel like the neuroscience of perception allows us to live in our Western culture and then understand Tai Chi as, oh, I'm working with balance. I don't need to believe in Chi. I can feel a change in my perception and it affects my balance, and that's fine. And so I feel like we are in the same terrain, and the practices from history are amazing. But I feel that for us in our culture today, we benefit from being able to understand it as this is just the normal, everyday human, the amazing human who is, as I think Alan Watts said, your body knows that you are one with everything. Our active minds may forget, but there's something here, that we don't need to leave home for. So, other reports or recountings of your experience in sitting and standing, or any questions about anything?
One brief report with your invitation to take in smell, the lightness of standing with citrus right here, and the pleasure in it also was really distinct.
Great, cool. I mean, the funny thing is that we absolutely don't need to learn a new right way, but we need to discover what we're doing, and what we don't realize is what we're doing. So if I separate it into, are we using the ground? What's good about that? What feels good? Are we using our other senses? What benefits do we get? People sometimes report that things feel lighter because you're oriented differently. So imagine at the end of the day, if you got, lighter instead of more tired, that would be good. So thanks. Is that all from you, Judith?
I do have a question
A question I had about the book. One of the things that I loved was the way in which your presence in the book as the student of someone and the student of practices was really palpable. And I think that's, in my imagination, at least a less written from perspective than people who have something they're teaching, though I'm not sure I believe that. But I wonder if there's a kind of craft to teaching. Is there also anything you can offer those of us who are currently students of somatics in terms of like the craft of being a student?
Yeah, great question. I want to say that Hubert gave us permission to videotape his classes and not share them with anybody outside of the classes. And for a person like me, who, as I recount in the book, we had to travel to see Hubert, and so we were always doing intensives for 5 days or 7 days. And by the third day, that was too much. But I had videos, and we were able to take them home, listen to the words, transcribe the, content. And then I would say, what are you talking about? You said this, or why did we do this? And so there was a back and forth that was possible. So that's both a teacher and student that I think was very, Hubert's generosity was really special to me. And I think that it's a combination of how that works together, but repetition and delving into, the way I organized this book was with the idea in mind of teaching this material in a way that I wouldn't forget stuff. Sometimes I say it's like a file cabinet of, things that have been important to me over many years. But I really feel like dialogue, trying things, questioning them, having that space where there's an ongoing conversation is very important. Did that give you enough delving?
Hi, Aline.
Hi.
You always break my brain, and I'm constantly reimagining. I was one of your students in the training program. What was inspiring just now is I'm curious about the imagined audience of this. You're like anyone with a body, right? And then you're sharing this, the robotics, and then I'm curious. Is this the people who design the robots? Is that your target audience, perhaps? Is this your $1 million defense contract that you're getting, right?
Did you talk to them?
Well, but then then you say like the need to put it into a book. It's like we need the gap that you said about language, capturing that. So you're articulating this, and you're probably speaking to the somatic nerds in a way, and people with bodies. But I'm curious, do you imagine that this is also for people who, like, can this infuse in that technology?
Yeah, I do. And in fact, in our last book talk in Washington, D.C., to my delight, somebody in the audience said, I am a roboticist. So I do feel that way. I want to ground this material. I do believe, and I do experience the mysticism of it, the mystery of we are connected. I can read, you can read me, that beautiful dimension. But it is so nice to have some science to support what we're talking about. And there is so much science. What is funny is that the meeting doesn't happen. So Stacy, can you pull up that square, that illusion? So part of what I'm so grateful for, can you just tell me what you see? Pac-Man. Do you see a white square? Okay, there is no white square there. You are seeing 4 Pac-Man, but you are putting in that white square. Why do I know this? Because maybe last month there was great article about some scientists studying illusions. And what I just totally loved is at the end of the article, there was just a little, we think perception is more negotiable than we usually imagine. That's from the hardcore neuroscientists. They are not dancers. So, but that's so beautiful, to say, oh, this is a negotiation. I have something I can bring to this meeting. Even when the world is difficult, I can soften or get more support. I have so many options, and we need to learn that stuff, and the scientists are contributing to it. So I just feel that writing this book, which I can tell you was not easy, took a long time, really was hard, but I feel like it's really worthwhile because I can give it to a scientist. There are a lot of references. Anyone can follow this material into the very today. It's not like some of Debi and I were talking about our somatic teachers, like like Alexander and Ida Rolf and Feldenkrais. They have passed away. They're not here to learn what we now know thanks to these scientists about plasticity and everything. So they're not, we need to be talking language of the present, and there's definitely a lot that we can share. And so I get excited because it's in the language of the present, and I can read Science of Today almost every month. Something pops up that's really amazing and just reinforces this path that we're on. So thanks for that question. And if you know any contractors, I think Berklee and the scientists ought to make a match.
Yeah.
Any other comments from your experiential moment or thoughts or questions? Peter.
Well, I mean, experientially, to pay attention to the physical sensations, well, not just the internal sensations, but the ground below and holding me and then my moving away from it, made me hyper aware of all the different sensations. And I noticed it was very helpful that the number of weight changes, and it heightened my sensitivity to what was happening, which I often don't pay attention to. So there was a lot. But my question, and I think I know a little bit from hearing from you in the past, but if I can pay more attention to my external environment, my perceptual awareness on all these different planes, so what? Help me understand how I can move in the world differently. I can maybe behave differently in relation to the world or to people or to anything that comes through my field of vision, gravity, etc. Tell me why, if I'm a dancer or a scientist or I'm an athlete, any of the ways that I move, what help me understand how I can be more aware, function at a higher level.
I think I understand your question. There's a quote I love from the Buddha, which is that the place of greatest suffering is the doorway to liberation. And the reason, the way I'm answering your question is, usually a person has a problem, and that's a really great place to start, because that's what matters. We want to suffer less. So whatever our problem is, however we would describe it, maybe for me it's, sharing my thoughts in a public setting, and for another person it's their ankle, and for another person it's their anxiety. Wherever the problem is, that's where we want to start, because that's where there's some energy to make a difference. Otherwise, it's, these teachings are not mine. They have been around. They come from other cultures. They show up in our culture because people need them. When you're having a great time, it's a little harder to access. But if you're an athlete or a dancer or a musician and you're trying to perfect or be able to do your craft better, that's another motivation that brings you to this question. So, it's not a blanket, everyone should. It's more, how do we make this available so that when people are suffering, this is something they know about, that it's more than talk therapy, that you can actually access changes through your physical experience. We need to talk about it. It's powerful, that's why we do it, but we need to share it more widely, and for that we need better language, or more language. Let's not judge it. So
more shared language.
Shared language.
Not so siloed. That's what I'm excited for.
Yeah, and places where we can have the conversation, where the conversation can come up so that everybody's talking about it. Everybody's a body. So far, the robots are still working on it. But so with that, maybe we'll close. Do you have a question?
Can I ask one last question?
Sure.
Aline said she's been working on this book since she's known me. I'm not sure that's actually true. It
Since
is, maybe.
before.
But I can say that I've been preparing to write a book myself, and I want to know what advice you have for writers. And then I'll
Yeah.
stop.
I think there's no right way, no pun intended. I really think we're so different. And the hardest part is doing it. And for some people, joining a class, for some people, making a commitment, that doesn't always work for me. And collaborating. But, I think that the popular term is grit, otherwise known as stick with it. And it may take you a long time. I've written lots of articles about Hubert's work, and then I started writing 1,000 words a day after my practice, and that's what got me the next step. But just if you keep at it, it will manifest. So thank you. Thank you so much, Debi. Thank you, all of you who are here, and Stacy for supporting this idea. And I'm very, very appreciative of this opportunity. So, and look forward to talking more. And don't forget to have a snack.
Yes, have a snack.
Ginger
Thank you.
biscuits from Effie's.
Yeah, thank you again, Aline and Debi, for being like the first launch of this new generation of books at Berklee. Thank you to our CAMS team, the content folks who are going to be recording and editing this video that's going to go onto our YouTube channel where you can watch that later. One thing I also forgot to mention too, the Berklee Library's archives also has a digital repository called Remix, and this video will also be going on to the Berklee archives. So if for whatever reason it's not on YouTube anymore, it will definitely be preserved at the Berklee archives. Also, thank you to the creative technology student workers who also helped set up the event. And stay tuned to your email announcements. The next Books at Berklee will be on April 9th with Dr. Rhoda Bernard. So yay, we have some fans in the audience, so that's wonderful. And thank you so much for coming. Get home safe, enjoy a snack, and have great weekends, and thanks for coming. Bye, folks.